Right. And that was a mistake. We should have left some of their infrastructure in place because there were some people who were highly qualified. It was sort of like denazification. We had to build from the ground up. But Doug, do you think that regardless of whether you think we should have gone in, is it the right move to pull out? And what exactly do we do now, if anything, now that ISIS is taking over the north of the country and the Iranians are now having significant influence in the south?
I think we should do exactly what the president is doing right now, which is to acknowledge the fact that Iraq is declining. Iran increased its strength largely because of our presence in Iraq. We're using a little bit of judo to allow those forces to come in where they have more credibility than the very minor force that we've got or the ability to project it.
So you basically think that we should be asking the Iranians in to work out the situation?
Yeah, I think that...
really? Despite the fact that the Iranians are a stated enemy of the United States. They're not exactly friends to us or our allies.
So be it, but that's real politics.
Well, Doug, that may be real politic, but the Iranians are not only stated enemies of ours and people who are pursuing nuclear weaponry. Do you really trust the Iranians not to pursue anti-American interests in that part of the world? And if so, based on what?
I don't trust anyone. Remember, we fought 2 wars with our greatest ally, Great Britain. We fought a war with Japan and brought them to their knees with the atomic bomb. They're our allies today. In other words, today's enemy may be your friend tomorrow, and vice versa.
Well, that's true, but only after you beat the hell out of them in a war, right? I mean, the British became our friends after not only the Revolutionary War, but the really terrible War of 1812. And the Japanese, as you mentioned, only became our friends after we bombed the living hell out of them, firebombed Tokyo, and then atomic bombed them twice. I mean, I have yet to see anything approaching that with regard to Iran.
And I don't see that the Iranians have anything but hatred for the way that we were supporting the Shah back in the 50s.
Well, that's 100% true. But letting the Shah fall was a major mistake. And Doug, thanks so much for your call as well as your service. This is sort of the problem with this whole situation. We have a situation in which nobody really wants to say the reality. The reality is that if the problem was pulling out, then the solution is going back in. And we all know it. But nobody really wants to say that. Because we all understand that it's politically unpalatable. We spent the last decade and a half ripping on President Bush for going in the first place. And instead of seeing the world as it is, we're trying to see the world as we wish it were. A bad situation in Iraq. Therefore, it must be Bush's fault. A bad situation in Iraq. Therefore, we can't do anything now because, after all, we shouldn't have been there in the first place. I don't see what one has to do with the other. There's a good case to be made that American policy with regard to Japanese oil drove Japanese expansionism in the Pacific leading up to World War II. That case has been made before. I don't completely buy it, but it's not world's weakest case. Does that mean that when Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, we don't destroy them? Does it mean that when Japan attacks Manchuria, we shouldn't have taken any measures against them? After all, it wasn't our business. It was on the other end of the world. The world is not that big a place anymore, and it's getting ever smaller. We can either fight them there or we can fight them here. Now, regardless of what you thought about Iraq, that truth is still true. Line 2 in Arlington, you were a machine gunner in the first invasion. Thanks so much for joining the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, sir.
Yeah, Ben, love your show, man.
Go for it.
Anyway, I was with the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines in the invasion in 2003. It was a terrible experience, but it was something that I felt that was rewarding in the end. We worked our way from the line of departure in Kuwait into Iraq, all the way up the MSR to Baghdad. There was a lot of... The thing that I saw that really bothered me, I guess, at the end was I saw a lot of unnecessary killing. Just a lot of civilians getting killed.
By whom?
By fellow Marines. And it was hard. It was hard to take in. And I saw an entire village get leveled by 81 Mike mortars that we had patrolled through about an hour before that. But in the out of all of that, I feel that we did the right thing, because when we got to Baghdad and we rolled through the streets of Baghdad, it was the 1st Marine Division, the 3rd Army Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne. We all met in Baghdad, and it was like a parade when we got there. We were told that we were going to be the worst urban combat since Vietnam, since Way City, and we were greeted with a parade. People were throwing flowers at us, food, thanking us. They were happy that we were there, that we liberated them. And, I maybe it's just in war, civilians do die, but that's really the biggest thing that's hit me. And now seeing all this crap going on with Obama's decisions, I have friends that are dead. I watched them die. And it just really bothers me that I just feel like it was for nothing. And, a lot of Americans today, it's almost like they're dumbed down. They believe everything they hear on the liberal media, and you try to talk any type of truth or sense into them, and they just don't want to hear it, whether you've been in combat or not. So,
and this is such a good point what you're saying. I mean, yes, did bad things happen while the United States was there? Sure. Did horrible things happen? In Iraq while the United States was there? Absolutely. But the question is, okay, well, here's the world while the U.S. is there, and here's the world when we pull out. The world while we're there is that you have a relatively stable country with sectarian tension, but significantly less sectarian violence. And then the world after you pull out is mass shootings in the streets. And this is why the U.S. is a force for good in the world. And I think that every time we hear criticism of the United States, we ought to remember exactly what it is that the United States stand for. And thank you, sir, for your service, and thank you for standing up for what not only it means to be an American, but what exactly we stand for in the world. JR on your cell, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show, AM 770 KTTH. Go for it, JR.
Hi, Ben. It's great to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Go for it, sir.
I spent almost 12 years in the military, sometime in special operations and sometimes in conventional forces, and I've been to both Afghanistan and Iraq a few times each. And I just want to give you my take on this a little bit here.
Sure.
The United States is absolutely a force for good in the world, and our closest ally is in the Middle East and is constantly being threatened by the forces of evil that are around it. And that's not the reason that we went to war there. Initially, it was an act of self-protection, self-preservation, which is a natural right for a country to have. But the liberal left that has controlled the government for the last few years now in this country has changed policies so much that it started affecting even good military leaders and their judgment for fear of being called out, for fear of being having their careers ruined. When you're in a war zone, and in a war zone, there's certain things that you do. Bad things happen. War is a terrible thing. But as long as you're fighting a good fight, it all kind of evens out in the end. But when you have commanders come and say that war is not about killing the enemy, war is about giving the enemy a better alternative than picking up arms, or war is about giving our money, our treasure to these other countries to help them build infrastructure. If we were so great at doing that in foreign countries, why do we have the high unemployment rate that we have right now?
JR, no, I think there's certainly truth to that. This is not. Well, this is a great point. America should not be in the business of nation building, but once we're there, it's not about nation building. It's about prevention of violence. Our job, once we get to a country, is to pacify it the same way that a police force's job is to pacify violence in a particular city. And basically what you have over in Iraq is a religiously motivated gang war. And just like any other gang war, if you have a presence large enough on the ground to begin building a feeling of trust and security, then you're going to be able to mitigate violence. But the minute that you pull out, the minute that you decide that it is a secondary goal to prevent violence, instead it's more important to pull out, you're going to end up exactly with what you have here. I mean, it is so strange to me that people don't seem to understand that basic rules of human behavior do not cease to apply just because you're in Iraq or Afghanistan when they clearly apply back here in the United States.
Absolutely. And the most terrible thing, Ben, I fear is that, when we pulled out of Iraq and seeing everything that's happened, you're absolutely right. I agree. We should have stayed there and continued to commit to the stability of the region, because you're right. Once we've gone in and subdued or pacified a population, now there is, it's still protecting ourselves by helping them kind of rebuild like we did with Japan and Germany, and they're now our allies because of that. Previous caller had mentioned them as well. Yep. But we're about to have the same thing happen to us in Afghanistan.
Yep, absolutely, JR. And you can see it coming. And thank you for your service, and thank you so much for your call. Well, this is the Obama administration's philosophy, is that America is not a force for good in the world. The less America there is, the better off we are. There's only one problem. It's not true. Now we come back. Big parade over in Fremont. What exactly were they celebrating? Get ready. Ben Shapiro Show, AM 770, KTTH, KTTH.com. Okay, Fremont is a wild place. That's a wild place. And we all know it, but here we are. The Seattle Post-Intelligencer covered the Fremont Solstice Parade. They're celebrating the summer solstice 2014. According to Jordan Stead and Joshua Trujillo, thousands gathered under a blue sky to enjoy the quirky sights and sounds of the 26th anniversary of the Fremont Solstice Parade. Nude bicyclists traded high fives from their bike seats. On Saturday, most of these people should never be naked, like ever. Ever, ever, ever. Like, no one should ever have to see... They should not have to see them naked. They should shower wearing full bodysuits. The parade, as part of the Fremont Fair, ended in Gasworks Park with Honk Westfest, where the celebration with local and national street bands, food, beverages, and art carried on until nightfall. Apparently, people played with a giant inflatable ball during the Fremont Solstice Parade. They had really nice weather. Everybody is, and these pictures are nuts. Basically, people painting themselves and wearing crazy masks and dancing around like idiots, and looks like they're having fun rolling giant inflatable balls over each other. It's a wild place. And when they're not celebrating their commie statue over in Fremont, I guess that they're celebrating the solstice, because this is what pagans do. They celebrate the solstice. The solstice, for those who don't know, astronomical event. It occurs twice each year as the sun reaches its highest or lowest excursion relative to the equator. So they've been celebrating the solstice all over the country, pagans all over. They're greeting the solstice at sunrise at Stonehenge, apparently. Druids, pagans, revelers flocking to Stonehenge for the summer solstice, according to the Associated Press. It's the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. Apparently 36,000 sun watchers gathered on the Salisbury Plain, about 80 miles southwest of London, on Saturday. Police say that the event was peaceful, with only 25 arrests, mainly for drug offensive. Ooh, boy. These pictures are ugly. People took part in mass yoga practice and danced with hoops. There's a guy who, carved his tongue in two and has metal teeth and tattoos on his face. Yeah. The rise of paganism in America is actually not really a joking matter. The decline of religion, traditional religion, has made way for a new philosophy in the United States, one that was never accepted before. This please yourself as much as possible philosophy that paganism is based on. Paganism is based on the idea that basically gods are people, and therefore people are gods. Right? Paganism is based on the notion that there is no God.